Hello, I've just read chapter 41 of Coruscant Nights, Jedi Twilight. So Nick, Xizor, and Caird are approaching where the others are. It's made very clear that Xizor's skin went pink because he was releasing pheromones. And I guess it kind of explains why Nick was trying to figure out a way to try and bring Xizor onto his side. Um, and Shizor orders Bug Eyes to go ahead and take and stun everyone, not kill them, but stun them. And Nick's left confused because Shizor says it so quietly. That Nick can't pick up on it because he's human. Um, and when he hears the shooting, Nick is about to gets completely confused. He's about to try and ask him what's about to go on. He starts swinging over and he gets stunned by Shizor. And then we have the exact same scene play three different times from three different characters' perspectives. Um, basic. So I'm just kind of going to talk about the main scene collectively. We're giving little bits of information on the scene from different characters' perspectives, but I'm just gonna. So I'll just treat the scene as a scene, but I'll treat the but I'll go through its perspectives in the order they're shown. So Shizor has got Jax's lightsaber. Jax is in front of him. Nick's arms are being held by Bug Eyes. And of course Caird is just there. Um, and Shizor has Jax's lightsaber, and he's saying to him that it's nothing personal, it's just business, and that he has a plan that he wants about trying to get close to Vader, and he can't risk them impeding that plan. Um, Here we go. Here's what Shizor says specifically, and this is in the second perspective, but I'm just going to read it out now. It's nothing personal, you understand, Shizor was saying to Jax, but I've been looking for a way to establish an alliance of my own with Lord Vader. The information in this droid appears to be the key, and I have to make sure that there are no entanglements that will impede my plan. Your friend here, he nodded at Nick, was kind enough to lead us to you. Um, and anyway, then we're seeing the first perspective we get is from Dender, and he sees everything going on, and he realizes that he has to do something, and we're told that he has the option to either do nothing, let Jax get killed, and he gets his friend's I-5 back, or we can save Jax's life, but he has only a few seconds to decide. And we're told that I5 is deactivated, but he had done some but we're reminded about how how earlier I5 had said he had further modifications, and among those modifications includes a way to reactivate him without turning on the switch that that turns him on and off. There is a certain password that can be said that has to be said specifically from Den, that will reactivate I5, and then makes the decision that he's going to say it. He's going to save Jax, which I think shows a great development of his character. How he, even though, and he also then does wonder why Jax isn't using the Force to free himself and get out of the situation, and he wonders that maybe he's just lost his mojo, maybe he's tired, etc. Um, so anyway, Dane leans over to I5 and he whispers Bota. And I5 I5's photoreceptors slightly turn on. And he knows exactly what I5's gonna do, and we're told that Den just wishes he could plug his ears, but he can't because his hands are cuffed. I think it's gonna be the exact same move I5 did in at the start of part 2, where he collapsed the old, I want to say cave, but I don't think it was a cave. Onto the droids outside of Rocco's, if you remember. I think he's going to do that. Um, Based on because I5 released a scream when he did that, and that's going. I'm giving Den's wanting to plug his ears. I think that's what it's going to be. Anyway, the next perspective we get is Nick, and we're told about how he had a lapse in judgment and completely forgotten about the Feline's ability to influence others. And again, that's when we get to see Xizor's conversation with Jax that I read out. And Jax looks at Nick when Xizor indicates Nick. And Jax doesn't look with him with anger or contempt, just wariness. I don't know, I just want to check. No, I didn't miss anything, I don't think. Then and Nick's trying to evaluate what to do because his hands are grabbed by bug eyes. He can't, even though he's a trained soldier, he knows he can't really fight his way out. This Xizor's a master of many martial arts and he has a lightsaber now in his hand. And he could just release pheromones again. And he has a blast, and Nick has a blaster still on his hip, but of course he's got his arms grabbed by bug eyes. And then Xizor raises Jax's lightsaber and says, again, it's nothing personal, it's business. And that's when Nick decides that he has no other choice. He has to say, Zuwoohammer. He has to get Bug Eyes onto his side. And so he whispers to Bug Eyes, Zuwoohammer, release me. And of course, Bug Eyes releases Nick, and very clearly Xizor overheard it, and it is taken aback for a second, and Nick rushes forward and tries to grab Jax's lightsaber from Xizor's hand, and he commands Bug Eyes to release the Jedi. And Xizor winds up backhanding Nick, and he gets flung across the room into a far wall. And we're told that Nick's chest is really hurting. He says it was a miracle, but a painful one. So he may have been hit by a lightsaber. How does Nick, in every single story he's in, receive some sort of injury or something that goes on in his insides? Then we cut over to Caird, who's kind of thinking back over how, she's always manipulated Nick with his pheromones. And he's thinking back to also how about the feral droids and how the lab have been destroyed. And he thought how battle droids can't really do that because even their programs to not be as messy as that. And it seemed like the droids had enjoyed, if they were droids, it seemed like whoever did it had enjoyed killing them. And then he overhears Nick whisper to Woohammer, pardon me. And he thinks about now's his chance, he could run, get out of there, but he wouldn't be able to release his hands because they're force cuffs. He can't just, the only thing that will open them is the key, and that's on Xizor. So he decides the best chance he has is to just wait until Xizor releases him, and again, just hope he's in a good situation then, and hope that a miracle happens. But he also knows also in his experiences, miracles don't really happen. But it says, even that, he was very happy to be proved wrong, even with the pain the miracle brought, and I assume it's what I5's doing. So that's where we end the chapter. It was quite nice to kind of see how Nick's thoughts about having Xizor on his side winds up kind of just being a little bit of his own accord, I think. but also mainly just of Xizor's doing to, can't bring him under his influence. Again, this is like my second story that has involved Xizor. I've read stuff with him in Evasive Action, but I haven't really read anything else that involves him. Um, so this is really the first stop. So I read Evasive Action back in 2024. Don't really remember a whole lot about it, and the stuff that Xizor was in some of the worst pieces of Evasive Action, unfortunately. At least in my opinion, I think Prey and Endgame just weren't very good, but. So it's kind of nice to see Xizor in a kind of better role here. Um, and again, it's cool. And again, it's nice to see him being used in a bit more thorough way. I think that's the best way I can put it. In a more thorough way, where he's we're seeing how he manipulates, etc. We kind of got with his we kind of got a bit of his manipulations in the base of action. But it's great to see kind of the more in-depth and thorough bits of it. It says that when Xizor says it's just nothing personal, it's just business. We're also told from Cair's perspective that to him it's always personal, because the amount of assassinations he's carried out now are just for business in quotes. He just knows it's always personal. And he knows that Xizor is always one for the dramatic gesture because he's killing Jax with Jax's lightsaber, etc. That a point is made of that with Caird. Again with Caird, you really do feel bad for him. You just want him to go home, and he's in such a terrible spot at the moment. Yeah. Then great to see a little bit of development in his character. How much, despite how much he hates Jax, you still see how much he cares for people's well-being. He doesn't necessarily like Jax, but he still cares for his well-being. And you also see a little bit of that hesitancy for him to save Jax. And I think it really is quite an interesting thing in his character. It's quite an interesting thing for his character. For Nick, trying to rescue them, it really was a yes moment, and I really hope, I really hope he is okay. But I am kind of under the impression that he may have a lightsaber wound in his chest or somewhere. I know it says Xizor only backhanded him, but still, I'm sure he probably has some sort of lightsaber wounds. Because again, anytime Nick appears in a book, in Shatterpoint, in Mindor, he has to have either some sort of massive injury or massive surgery, something that has something to do with his insides. And it always just is, oh, can Nick never get a break? But yeah, it definitely feels like there was a lot. I do think that it felt like there was going to be a lot going on in this chapter, and I probably would have liked to have seen the effects of I5, screaming, because I think that's what it's going to be. Maybe shown in this chapter, rather than saving it for whatever's going to be in next chapter, or the chapter after, or whatever it's good, or whenever it's going to be. But yeah. So now, and there's a couple of things I do want to kind of talk about, not really related so much to Coruscant Nights. And the first one which is related to it actually is, I know Rahinian's going to be in the first 3 Coruscant Night books. He's not going to be in the Last of the Jedi though. He's not going to be in the Last Jedi though. Because I had to just check his Wikipedia page. I couldn't keep waiting. I had to check it. The second thing which I've been meaning to talk about is the Ahsoka Season 2 teaser trailer released. Ahsoka was one of my favourite Star Wars shows, so I'm glad, we're finally getting it. I was so disappointed when they pushed it back this year to next year. So I'm so happy that, we've actually got a trailer for the show, and the release date's January 20th. So I'm going to be really looking forward to that. Because again, it's one of my favourite Star Wars shows. I do maybe hope they manage the flashbacks a little bit better this time. I do hope they maybe manage it a little bit better, just because at least in season 1, when they did the flashbacks in episode 5, it definitely felt like they were just doing it for the fan service. You know, it kind of served the plot, but it was so confident, but I think so very clearly those people were super confused as to what the lesson Anakin was trying to teach Ahsoka was, that it very much just winded up feeling like they were just doing it for the fan service. Um, and personally, for me, it is my least favourite episode of Ahsoka, just because it very clearly was done to make people go, oh look Anakin, oh look live action Rex. It very much was done for the fan service. And yeah, it's just so obvious, and I didn't really enjoy that episode a whole lot. So I hope that they manage the flashbacks a little bit better as in season 2. Um, so yeah. Anyway, I am going to be looking forward to the show. It so yeah, I'm definitely going to be again. I'm just going to look for. I'm just excited for the show. Um, it looks like it will be quite. It looks like it'll be a very good season. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I don't really have anything else to say with the circuit. I'm just looking forward to it. But yeah. Anyway, I enjoyed this chapter. I think it was a good, and again, just another good chapter. Um, we see kind of again Xizor's involvement in this chapter. Okay, it was kind of funny how we kind of covered we kind of covered the exact same scene 3 times, just from 3 different perspectives, and I think it's the same line of dialogue was said quite a few times throughout this chapter, just because we were seeing it from all sorts of different perspectives. So yeah. So it was a little bit of a funny chapter just because of because of all the different perspectives they were seeing it from, and these lines just getting repeated. But yeah, anyway, I think that brings an end to this review, so thank you all for watching, and goodbye. Hello everyone, I've just read chapter 42 of Coruscant Nights, Jedi Twilight, and there was a lot that was happening in this chapter all at once. So I5 did screech, and Xizor winds up dropping the lightsaber, and we're actually giving a little bit of a hint, we're actually giving a little bit more as to what as to why lightsabers turn off when they're not, when one lets go of a grip. And it seems Coruscant Knight's explanation for it is that there's a lock switch. A switch where if you press the lock, the lightsaber blades will not turn off if it lets go of your hand. So that's so that that actually is quite a nice explanation. And, lots of people have wondered that. So that's actually it's a very simple but a very good explanation. It's very simple but very good. And also, it explains lightsaber throwing as well, how you just set it on the lock and then boom. Anyway. So the lightsaber rolls away. And Xizor says to Bug Eyes Suwu Hummer just as he's about to release Jax, and of course and then Xizor points to I5 indicating to stop him. So Bug Eyes opens fire on I5, and I5 opens fire himself with his right index finger. And the two blasts hit each other, and they start releasing sparks and stuff. And Jax, of course, briefly looks away, and he runs over to his lightsaber. And he decides that he's going to use it to open the cuffs. So he tries spreading his wrists as far as he can. And we're told that if he's either the lightsaber will what does it say? And wait, before Jax does that, Bug Eyes' blast overpowers I5's and it hits I5, but don't worry, it's okay. And of course, then shouts out 5 and I think he tries making his way over to him. So the screeching stops. And that's when Jax moves over to his lightsaber. And that's when it says... That's when it says, the lightsaber might sever the energy link that bound his wrists, or it might resonate with the cuffs and fly him quicker than lightning. The only way to tell was... And, there's a hissing sound nearly as loud as I-5 screech. And, and then Jax gets pushed away and the lightsaber turns off, but his hands are free. And then Bug Eyes is about to line up a shot on Jax, so Jax rolls behind a fallen control panel. That's when, and then Bug Eyes runs. Then Bug Eyes and then Bug Eyes helms away the control panel, and Jax impales Bug Eyes with his vibro knife. There's a few instances here. Jax initially tries to force push Bug Eyes away before rolling, and that doesn't work. And when he's behind the control panel, he tries to reach for the Force. Again, it doesn't work. Anyways, Bug Eyes being impaled by the vibro knife, staggers back and winds up falling through the window, and a loud crashes down below. And then Jax is about to go and fetch his lightsaber, but he sees it's gone now, and he looks around and he sees Xizor with it, and Xizor goes to charge at Jax, and he again tries to force push him, but nothing. And Xizor does momentarily stop when he sees the hand raised, but then he just smiles once it doesn't do anything, and he continues going. And then there's a blast towards Xizor's feet and a blast above Xizor's head, and it's I-5, he's okay. And he orders Xizor to drop his blasters. Pardon me. And he also says, I know you're fast, but I don't think you can move faster than light. And so Xizor deactivates the lightsaber and chucks away his blasters, but he's still holding the lightsaber. And Nick Jax is about to go and get his lightsaber from Xizor, and then he realises Nick. And poor Nick. I knew I'll be honest, I was kind of worried that he wouldn't have some sort of nasty injury this book, or some sort of nasty thing happened to him, but it looks like he has. He's been impaled with a transparent steel shard in the exact same spot where he was where he's in the exact same spot where his insides almost fell out to him fighting Carvasta, where Carvasta had struck him. Just except of it being vertical, I assume it's some horizontal. So he's now got an X on his on him. X marks the spot. And he's he's surprisingly not feeling much pain. And Jax walks over, and Nick tries telling him everything that happened, how Vader has had blackmailed him, how he had been manipulated by Xizor, and he thought of another thing that he was trying to tell Jax, but he couldn't remember it. But Jax just keeps nodding and smiling. and he's not even. And Nick isn't even sure if he's talking or not. But we know he is. And he definitely can't hear what if Jack says anything because his ears are about as far gone as his legs at the moment. They're not working. And then Jax goes through Nick's coat, but Nick can't really feel anything. And then we're told about how he finally gets to have a rest. He can finally rest, finally be at peace, finally escape this war. He's finally, he, he doesn't have, he's, he can finally rest. He's served in the war, and now it's his time to rest. And he shuts his eyes because the light is getting too bright, and that's where we leave off Nick. And if this was how Nick died, I think it was a very sweet way to bring him out. How he's very much at peace here. He's very much at peace. And I think if Nick did die this way, it would have been it would have been both a tragic death, but also with how content he is, how much at peace he is. I think it'd also be a very sweet way for him to go. Of course, not sweet that he's been impaled again, but still sweet in ease, at peace. And I think this was a very not. If this was how Nick died, we know it isn't because it's in Shadows of Mindor, which takes place well over a decade. It's probably 2 decades. 2 decades after this, so he's definitely around still. He's not dead. But if it was how he died, it was a very nice way. It was a very sweet way for him to go. Then Jax removes, and I completely forgot about this. The lightsaber looking thing that Nick had taken from the Far Ranger, and this was what Nick was trying to tell Jax about, that he forgot. And I had completely forgotten about that. And Jax isn't quite sure what the weapon is either. Also, it is said that Nick sees Jax walk away, and he sees 2 silhouettes dancing about slowly. So I assume that's what's about to happen next chapter. And it is getting a bit sad with Nick because then he forgets who. It seems like he forgets who Jax is. Anyway, Jax walks over to Xizor with the one hand. It's a one-handed weapon. It is one-handed weapon, and he says to an I5 says that he's willing to decimate an enemy of his friends, and Jax just tells him what he wants I5 to do is retrieve the information from Bug Eyes, and he says that he and Xizor will settle this themselves. Pardon me. So I5 makes his way down through the transparency window, and Xizor beckons Jax and says, "Let's see what you've got." And Jax thumbs the switch, and then we end the chapter. Give me a moment. Sorry. Right. I'm not going to have a whole lot to say with this chapter just because it's very action-packed, and there's usually not a whole lot to talk about with action-packed chapters. They're very enjoyable to read, but there's not really a whole lot you can talk about in a review surrounding them. So they may not have a lot to say with this chapter. The first thing I do want to cover though, which is actually surrounding the action, is just how chaotic it was at first. There was quite a few things that went on. I5 screeching, Xizor saying Zulu Hammer, and then selling Bug Eyes to, just as Bug Eyes is about to release Jax, and then selling Bug Eyes to take out I5. It very much made me feel like I was in another Roblox Star Wars roleplay. Where, that kind of, where everyone's kind of participating and doing their own thing. That kind of very much reminds me of that. the other thing really is Nick. I can't avoid to discuss him, but again, I think if this was the way he dies, which we know it isn't, we know he's alive, he's in Shadows of Mindor, I read that earlier this year, but if this was how he did die, I think it would have been a perfect way for him to go. And I think you can very much tell he was very much at peace here. He was very much at peace. He almost, it's been said that he almost smiled at the irony of having an X on him now. And yeah, I think the way Nick would have died here, if we know he's alive. But if this was how he did die, I think it would have been perfect. Most definitely would have been perfect. And then of course we have Jax ordering I5 to go and fetch the data on Bug Eyes. No, I think this is less of him warming up to I5 and just him with I5. It's just I5 being the only other person that can do that. So yeah. Because everyone else is either because Sten and Labyrinth are cuffed, so is Caird, which I completely forgot was actually in the scene until he was brought up. And Labyrinth looks to either be dead or unconscious, but given she's cuffed, Jax thinks she's unconscious, and we know she's unconscious because I actually did have to go check. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to check when she dies, and it's in that last Jedi book, which is she always made it all the way through Coruscant Nights. But yeah. Do I have anything else to say? It's interesting that Jax's connection to the Force didn't come back at all this chapter. You know, he tried using it about 3 different times, and it never responded to him. Which I think is quite interesting, how, you know, he's been able to previously, it doesn't work at one point, but then it very quickly comes back, and here, it just didn't come back at all. So that's quite interesting. But yeah, I don't really have I guess surrounding Jax, again we see about how we see his softer side when he's kneeling over Nick. Again, we don't hear their conversation, we're not told a conversation, but we are told about how Jax is nodding along, smiling. I think it said he was smiling. So yeah, again we see that softer side that we saw a little bit earlier, just before the end of part 2. But yeah, I think that brings an end to this review. I don't really have much else to say. So yeah. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye. Hello everyone, I have just read chapter 43 of Coruscant Nights, Jedi Twilight. Now, this one will probably be a very quick summary, given the entire chapter is made up of the fights between Jax and Xizor. So, Jax has, of course, taken the weapon Nick Rostu told him to take, and it extends out a metal kind of blade, well, not blade, but kind of like, well, it winds up being a whip. With with green energy pulsing through it. And I thought it was just going to be a metal blade based on what I had seen a little bit further on, kind of like what Brianna uses in Knights of the Old Republic 2, just instead of it being a double-bladed weapon, it would just be a single-bladed weapon. That's kind of what I was thinking it would be when I read a little bit ahead, but no, it was a whip. And we're told that Jax has trained with whips before, but not as much as lightsabers. And so he and Xizor begin to fight, and quite a few times throughout the fight, Jax tries to draw upon the Force, but he just can't connect. It's made very. He starts to understand why he'd been trying to not use the Force, to not try and draw Vader or his minions toward him, and it becomes second nature to him to not use Force. So when he sort of just struggled to use it because of that. Anyway, the fight goes on, and Xizor's actually a very formidable opponent. Jax goes into it fairly confident, thinking that even a master of Terrascasi, even an adept of Terrascasi, can only hope for a draw against the Jedi. But as the fight goes on, the possibility of Xizor winning becomes very real. And he portrays quite a few feats that Jax that completely takes Jax by surprise in the fight. Pardon me. At one point in the fight, Xizor charges at Jax, and Jax is of course spinning the whip. Xizor's twirling and passing Jax's lightsaber from one hand to another at irregular intervals, and then Xizor surprisingly jumps over Jax and somersaults in a movement that Jax only thought could be done through the Force. Yet, of course, Xizor's not Force sensitive, but he's able to perform the movement. So Jax has to quickly swing the whip up to try and grab his lightsaber and pull it away from Xizor, but Xizor then just deactivates the lightsaber, so Tricata. And the whip starts falling and Jax has to get out of the way. When Xizor lands, he reactivates the lightsaber. Sorry, I've had a very sniffly nose for quite a while now. It's probably just all the pollen, at the moment. But anyway, as the fight goes on, there's a droid that comes in, and Jax has to very quickly take out the droid, and Jax is only barely dodges Xizor whenever he does dodge. Xizor's always extremely close to getting Jax. Eventually, when Jax does realise why he's struggling to connect to the Force, he takes a deep breath and lets half of it out, and then Dender shouts from behind him to a lookout. And Jax notices another droid coming, and it's an astromech this time, and with a catapult. And it launches a piece of metal toward Jax, and Jax tries to duck but too late, and he winds up getting hit on the head. He falls to the floor, and Xizor starts to loom over him, and Xizor's skin goes red, goes crimson, and Jax is fully prepared to become one with the Force and have all his unanswered questions be answered, etc. Oh, that just reminded me of another thing in the book. Let's just slip my mind again. What was it? No, I can't find it. But anyway, just as Jax is about to accept being one to die, he's now at a piece of serenity, and all of a sudden his right palm thrusts forward, and the Force comes, and he shoves Xizor back, and he shoves the droid back as well. And he stands, and Xizor's dropped the lightsaber, and Jax summons his lightsaber back as well as the whip, which, by the way, his whip fell out of his hand when he was knocked over. And now he understands that he would have been struggling to connect to the Force because he just wasn't in a place of serenity. And he had finally... I'll just read it out, if I could find it. Jax understood what had happened. In the acceptance of his impending death, he had returned to the level of serenity needed to be one with the Force. It had not been a matter of him losing his connection to the Force, it had been a matter of the Force choosing him once more as a vessel. And as Jax advances towards Xizor, Xizor tries releasing pheromones to try and manipulate Jax. But Jax, of course, he uses the force to push those pheromones and the air back towards Xizor. And he tells Xizor to yield. And that's when Xizor, instead of yielding, laughs and moves in a flash. And he leaps toward Jax' feet first, and Jax is only barely able to dodge, prepares to kill him if he has to. And when Xizor lands, he grabs Nick's blaster and opens fire. And Jax only realised what his plan was once it was too late, once he had already gotten over to Nick. And Jax, after of course, he deflects the incoming bolt, and in the flash that of the bolts being deflected, Xizor's gone. He's run away. And Jax thinks that it doesn't really matter. Xizor's out of the picture now. Also, poor Caird, he's still here. We're forgetting about Caird. Pardon me. Oh, pardon me. And then Jax feels the Force warning him that now there's another person coming, and of course he realises that someone more powerful than he's ever faced before, and it's Starphaser, and that's when we end the chapter. Also at one point when Jax's force push Xizor back, Dender says that now that's what I call a callback, a comeback. Sorry. So yeah. Anyway, this was a very interesting fight. It was quite an interesting fight. This one. It was really interesting. Now again, this is like really the main. I'm going to say this is kind of like the main thing I've seen Xizor in. I've read Evasive Action. It's been years since I've really properly gone through it, though. Again, I went through it in 2024, so it's been 2 years. I remember some bits of it, but it's something that I probably should read again. But I remember also not liking the ones that add Xizor. Nothing to do with Xizor. Xizor wasn't a bad character. It was just the writing of Evasive Action kind of just started to go downhill a bit once he got to Prey, which was when Xizor started getting involved. But hits, so this is kind of like the main thing for Xizor with me. And also Xizor didn't do a whole lot in Evasive Action anyway. It was really interesting to see how Xizor was able to keep up with Jax, and not only keep up with him, but also outdo Jax at certain points. Like he was incredibly fast at the very end there. He was able to move in a blink of an eye. He has his muscles were able to propel him with enough force that usually could only be accomplished with the force. Humans could only accomplish with the force. And he was again a very formidable opponent. And I actually do kind of wonder, would Jax have done as well if he had a lightsaber? Because I have a feeling the whip may have actually partly helped him. Because it is discovered the whip was twice as long as Jax's lightsaber at full length at one point. And quite frequently throughout the battle, Jax is constantly on the back pedal trying to keep his distance. And I have a feeling that maybe if Jax had his lightsaber and Xizor had a lightsaber and they were going head to head here, I think Jax probably would have actually might have wound up losing. Again, because he just wouldn't have been able to keep that range. Xizor was the one that kept closing the ground. Jax never pushed the attack. He never charged towards Xizor. Xizor was always charging towards him. Jax did make attacks, but he always was trying to keep his distance. And I have a feeling that, again, the whip was probably what allowed him to, I guess in a way, win this fight. It was a very interesting fight as well. It was, with Jax, it was, you see how there's quite a few times in the fight where he's trying to draw upon the Force and he just can't. It just doesn't answer him. And again, it was a very it's very good to kind of just, again, now that he knows how to connect to the Force, now it's just a case of can he keep that connection? Now that he knows how to connect to it again, can he keep that connection? Because I don't think this is quite over yet with the Force, with his Force connection. I think it might be, but I have a feeling that it may still pop up at least every now and then. I don't think it may not pop up as frequently, but it may pop up every now and then where he has to keep himself calm to use the Force. You know, he has to be in a place of serenity. Um, so it will be interesting to see if he still struggles to connect to the Force at times. Even though he now knows how to, it doesn't necessarily mean he's now going to always be able to connect. It doesn't mean that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Again with Xizor, he was a very interesting opponent. I didn't really think he would prove much of a challenge. I wasn't really expecting the fights to play out the way it did, and that's a good thing. You know, I was kind of expecting Jax to maybe have a massive upper hand, even though, you know, we know that even though it was said throughout the book that, you know, she's always as mastered Teras Kasi, which is a form specifically for fighting Jedi. I'm fairly sure. You know, I still wasn't expecting a whole lot to come from this fight. I wasn't really expecting a whole lot. But it was actually a very interesting and very surprising fight as well. The fight was very good. It took you by surprise at times with Xizor. Again, especially as someone where this is really my first proper thing seeing Xizor properly involved in a story. This was quite a nice surprise. I don't know if Xizor's or any other feline have proven to be this athletic in other stories. Again, I haven't read like the Shadows of Empire stuff. I know that's where I'm fairly sure that's where Xizor first appears. Not first mentioned. I know he's mentioned firstly somewhere else, but you know, I don't know if in like the Shadows of Empire novel, if he had more going on there, if we saw stuff like that there. I know he has a confrontation with Luke in that book, but I don't know how, you know, how much he does in terms of combat in that book, or in any other stories. Well, yeah, was actually a very formidable and but quite an interesting opponent here. So yeah. There was also some moments in the fight where Jax was thinking, "Oh, we should have just let I5 take Xizor out." And there was another bit in the chapter that I'm probably only going to remember once I end this video, because that's just how you know how it is. You know, when you think of something, it slips your mind, and you're finished doing what it is, and then you go, "Oh, that's what it was." I think I'm going to wind up having that happen. But yeah, it was a very interesting chapter. I didn't actually expect to have this much to say because usually combat chapters I enjoy them a lot, but generally there's not a whole lot to talk about with chapters that are focused on combat. Or Dender though, Dender, he 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 was brilliant in this chapter. He only had 2 lines of dialogue in this chapter, but first off, the way he warns Jax again shows that even though he doesn't necessarily like Jax, he still cares for his well-being. We can't stop that last chapter. I think it was the last chapter. Or was it the chapter before? Yeah, it was the chapter before, sorry. And how you know, the way he what was it? And the way he was just cheering Jax on, like, now that's what I call a comeback. Yeah, you could tell Jen was having a blast watching the fight in a way. He was definitely concerned, but also I think he was maybe having a little bit of a blast watching the fight. Um, um, whenever Jax, you know, got the upper hand, you can tell he was having a lot of fun with that fight. Watching it. But yeah. Anything else you want to say? I did at one. I think the fight was sometimes maybe a little bit of a struggle to follow, particularly with the whip. I think the whip again, it made the fight very interesting. Don't get me wrong, it did make the fight very interesting, very unique. But I think the way it was described as moving, at least in my head, the way it was described as moving in the book did not really correlate with how it would with how it would most probably actually be moving if it was done in if in real life. There were quite a few times where Jax was said to do a specific motion, and then that motion just didn't really wasn't have made much sense, at least in real life, based on how it was described. Maybe I was just picturing it wrong, but it sometimes the movements of the whip just didn't really correlate properly with what was described in the book. At least in my head, it didn't correlate properly. There was one point made towards at the very beginning where Jax it said he flicks or twirls his wrist and he cuts a jagged circle into the floor, but in my head that would have gotten done like a straight strike across the floor, probably done a circle in the air. So I think at times it didn't really make a whole lot of sense, and there's definitely a lot of other instances throughout the fight where the movement of the whip did not correlate with the description of Jax's movements. It just didn't make sometimes the movements of the whip did not make much sense to me. Um, but despite that, it was still a very interesting and intriguing fight. I think just maybe it could have been a little bit better. Could have been a little bit more. It could have been clarified a little bit better at times. But still, I very much enjoyed. I enjoyed the fight. I enjoyed the chapter. And I think the whip again, despite how it was maybe at times a little bit confusing to try and follow the movements when it didn't really properly connect to how Jax was moving, it still made the fight very interesting. And it wasn't, and even though it was a little bit difficult to follow because of the movements not properly matching how the whip moved, it still wasn't a massive hindrance. It was still the fight was still very enjoyable. Um, so yeah. I think that might be the last we see of Xizor, because I did check his Wikipedia page, and apparently he's not in the next books. Which, if so, I think that's I get that Xizor's storyline probably wouldn't have much else relevance much more relevance to Coruscant Nights. We would kind of just be seeing how we'd be cutting between Jax's storyline, and then we all just have one with Black Sun with Xizor that doesn't connect back at all at any point. Um, but still, I am actually intrigued with that storyline now, and I would like to kind of see that continued, but I don't think it will, because Xizor's not in the next book, and we only have 4 more chapters, I think. 3 more chapters. um, but yeah, again, I would like to see the storyline for both Xizor and Cairds continue, but I know they're not in the next books. I'm fairly sure Cairds' last appearance timeline wise. I know she's also in Shadows of the Empire. I'm fairly sure post Return of the Jedi. So yeah. So she is also still active, but he doesn't appear in any of the other Coruscant Night books, which I think is a bit of a shame, because again, he's been a very good villain so far. He's been a very good villain in this book. Has he been the best? I don't think so. I think, at least if we're talking strictly this book, I think Rahinian has probably been the best kind of villain in this book so far. Um, I wouldn't really consider Caird a villain. I wouldn't really consider him a villain. I think he's. I wouldn't really consider him a good guy, but I think he's closer to good guy than he is villain. But I think villain-wise, I think Rahinian's probably been the best villain in this book. Um, and even then, he's not really much of a villain. So yeah, there's a lot of there's some really good. This book kind of exists at some extremes with characters. Either the characters aren't very well developed, like Lamanth, or at least at first, Jax. Jax has kind of started to come into his own a lot more now. I can acknowledge, I can acknowledge that he's started to come into his own quite a bit now. And then there's some characters who are very interesting, quite deep in a way, like Rahinian. So, and Dender and I5. So there's a lot that this book kind of sometimes exists at various extremes. Um, but yeah, anyway, I'm gonna end the review here. I think I've rambled on long enough. I kind of want to. I want to read the next chapter. I want to read the next chapter. So I will probably do that. Next page is page 21. I'm fairly sure I've only got another 20 pages, haven't I? Okay, I've only got 22 more pages. Oh, that. Right, okay, maybe 23, because I haven't read 21, page 321 yet, but still, you know, that, that, mm, oh, that's really thrown me. That's actually really thrown me. It doesn't feel like there's that much. It feels like there's still quite a bit left, because, you know, there's so much in this book that still needs to be done. I think maybe the book just listen. I think the length of these chapters so far has been great. You know, they're not much longer than they were in like Last of the Jedi. Which that was, I think Last of the Jedi was like my ideal chapter length. You know, I think those chapters were they were very well paced, very good. They were a very good length. The chapters in this book tend to be a very good length. Sometimes they're a little bit too long for my likings, um, but it doesn't mean that they're bad in any way. You know, I think they still have a very good length. The chapters in this book. They're, I think it's mainly just the pacing that maybe brings it down a little bit at times. I think the pacing can sometimes just be a little bit too slow, which I think may contribute to, you know, why I was sure so much early on in the book. I'm sorry, I'm kind of just talking more about the book at the moment, but I very much do like the length of the chapters. You know, they're well, they are a good length. They're a good length. They're not too long, but they're not too short. Um, and again, it feels, I feel it feels really strange being, but yeah, the book though, um, the book, this still feels like there's so much that needs to be tied up. You know, it still feels like cares needs to be tied up. I think Xizor's now at a point where we could probably just, you know, close the book on him. I know Nick's starting the next book, so you know he has to be tied up. His storyline has to be tied up here. And it still feels like there's still so much that we has to be done, and we just haven't gotten anything done yet. And it still feels like there's still so much that needs. It feels like there's still so much that needs to be done, and we just haven't got that time. You know, but I'm sure the book is going to find a way to hopefully and satisfyingly um do it all, tie everything up in a neat bow. And I do hope Cares at least has some closure in this chapter. Not in this chapter, you know, at least in this book, because he's not in the next one, he's not in the other ones. I hope he at least has some kind of closure. Um, he just, I know he's not going to get home at this point. That's a thing that's out of the possibility now. But I do hope that at least there is at least some kind of closure for him. Anyway, that brings me into this review. I've gone on long enough, so thank you all for watching, and goodbye. Hello everyone, I have just read chapter 44, I think? Yeah, 44, of Coruscant Nights, Jedi Twilight. So, um, Jax, senses that Labyrinth is waking up, um, and once she does, Jax releases both Labyrinth and Dane, and he's prepared for the energy discharge this time. And he explains that Vader's coming, and then I5 appears. And I5 says that he has good news and bad news. The good news winds up being that Bug Eyes is that the feral droids have already scavenged Bug Eyes, and they've taken away his CPU with all the information. So that's maybe, and then asks, well, what about the good news then? And I5 says that is the good news. And he says the bad news is that the radiation leakage is getting worse. Um, oh, I went way too far, mate. Oh, before I5 appears, Caird asks if he can be released. And Jax says that he can keep the cuffs on, and until they get to know him a little better. Um, anyway, after I5 explains, that's when Jax says that Vader's coming. Um, and that he may already be here. And that's when Caird asks, okay, now can someone please remove my cuffs? And this time, Drax obliges. He senses ruthlessness coming from Caird, but he doesn't sense any betrayal into over, and so he releases him. Um, and Caird introduces himself as Caird, of course. And he says that they're going to need something big to cover their escape and convince Vader to either get Vader taken out or convince Vader to, you know, that Jax might be dead. Um, and he goes over to I5 and explains his plan. And I5 asks if he's sure he wants to sacrifice his lightsaber for this, and Jax says that he is sure. Um, here's the conversation. I5 projected surprise. Are you willing to give up your lightsaber? Are you willing to give up your weapon to do this? I'm not happy about this, but I don't see another choice, Jax replied. The only life form readings that the Phaeton scanners picked up in a 500-kilometer radius were Xizors and Cares. I don't mind sending a bunch of feral droids for the scrap heap and maybe Vader as well. I have sensors up to it. Not a problem. The radiation signature is quite detectable. Um, so Jax hands I5 his lightsaber, and I5 walks over looking around, and then he drops the lightsaber. Then one asks if he's crazy. If he's crazy. Ask um He asks, have you flipped your chip? What was that all about? Um, and Jack says that it wasn't I5's plan, it was his. And I5 replies, I assume it's I5, it's not clarified who's stalking. It was a good one. I'll be happy to help you find a new lightsaber if we get out of here alive. And then asks about Nick. And Jax says, and Jax starts being filled with sorrow. And he says that to bring him over, to take him with them. He deserves a funeral. And he orders I5 to pick him up, and I5 says that Nick's still alive, yay! Even though we knew he was alive because he's in Mindor, but yay! um, and everyone in everyone in the room, Den, Jackson, Naranth, but not Cares. Cares just that has a look of surprise, but Naranth, Jackson, Den just go what? Um, and I5 makes the diagnosis of all the problems he has and says that he can be treated. That the effects are reversible and he can survive if he's treated within 24 hours. And Jax says there's probably a med pack on the freighter, but they have to go now. And they start running, and then asks why are they having to rush. Um, and I5 it pretty much explains that the lightsaber approximately has about 25 minutes until it hits the reactor, and the reactor will of course explode, probably. And what does he say? Will someone tell me what we're running from? Den asked as he hurried to keep up with the others. About 10 meters beneath our feet is the reactor containment unit, I-5 said. I mentioned before that it was unstable. In fact, long-term exposure to radiation leakage may be what drove the droids mad. In any event, I estimate we have less than 25 minutes before the lightsaber burns its way through the impervium shielding. And gotcha, Ten said. He doubled his speed, pushing past the others. And Drax says that it might work. He thinks it might work. And that the explosion would at least be enough to either kill Vader or get Vader off their trail for a while. And then there's the ending phrases of the chapter. They hurried through the dark corridor, I-5 carrying Nick Rostu and lighting the way. It appears that he being Jax, has a droid, Jax mused. Not as property, but as a friend. An odd concept, but one he was getting used to. It was good to have a friend. And that's where we end the chapter. Let's just start with Jax and I-5. First off, when reading the chapter, I was thinking, oh, okay, maybe Jax just asked I-5 to do it because I-5 would be probably the only one that would be willing to drop the lightsaber and not consider it a crazy idea. But no, it's something that he's starting to trust I-5. I really do not know when this shift happens because really in the context of the story, it's only was like 20 minutes ago he was not keen on I-5 at all. So I don't quite know where this has come from. It may have been I-5 saving his life a couple of times. I'm fairly sure it was a couple of times, wasn't it? Yeah, it was a couple of times. He saved him from Xizor. He saved him from the feral droids. So maybe it's that. And it feels, as much as I like the little development, it does feel like maybe it's happened a little bit too quickly. It does feel like maybe that's occurs a little bit too quickly. Because again, in the context of the story, it's only been like 20 minutes. This feels like it's happened very suddenly. I think that's maybe my only gripe with it. That maybe it feels like it's happened a little bit too suddenly, and that there hasn't really been any conversation between I-5 and Jax. Well, there has, but not a lot since they came into the command room there. And there wasn't really much conversation that could have hinted to them through Jax slowly warming up to I-5. I feel like it's something where it's maybe this needs to be extended out just a little bit more. But it's nice to see that he's warming up to Wi-Fi. It is nice to see that. And hopefully that does kind of mean that, first off, maybe it's that could hopefully mean there's a little bit more room for Larenth to grow as a character a bit more in the next book. Maybe that could also mean there's a little bit more time to go a little bit more and learn a bit more about Jax's character. Yeah. I think to me at least it just feels like it's maybe a little bit of a too quick of a shift. Because again, in the context of the story, it's only been like 20 minutes they've been there, and now Jax is, and only like an hour ago, Jax was wanting to shove I-5 out of a skimmer, and get rid of him. But I suppose the I-5 saving his life and coming up with some good ideas has slowly got Jax warming up to him. But yeah. Yeah, I'm somewhat struggling to wrap my head around it, I think. Just because of how sudden it feels like it's come out of. It just feels quite sudden that it's happened. I think that might just be what my problem with it is, though. It just feels very sudden, I think. And even though I like that, I knew this was going to be the kind of development tonight, and I was looking forward to it, I think it just, again, feels like maybe we could have had a little bit more time. To just make it so that where it's a bit more slow, you know. Again, I was expecting this to be dragged out throughout books 1, 2, and 3. I wasn't expecting it to be in the book, The Last Jedi. Just because I know that book is a spiritual successor. You know, that's technically not Coruscant Nights 4, but I am considering it part of Coruscant Nights for this. Um, just for this read through. Um, so yeah. Yeah, I like the developments. Again, I like the development. Don't get me wrong. I just feel like maybe it's just kind of suddenly come out of nowhere. I think that's my main problem with it. It's just kind of suddenly come out of nowhere. When we haven't really had that chance to kind of see a bit of a transitionary period. You know, it and it's just I just wanted to see a little bit more of a transition. You know, um, there are definitely moments where you can fill in the gaps and see how Jax has probably warmed up to him. You know that there's definitely those. You know, there's definitely those moments where they have. You can definitely fill in the gaps and see that. But I would have liked it to be a little bit more filled in. I would have liked for it to be shown Jax slowly, and I do mean slowly, be warming up to I-5 as the books go on. But again, maybe this is also just going to make the next couple books a lot easier. And despite this coming out and kind of somewhat coming out of nowhere, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean Jax is immediately going to all of a sudden be like, ah, buddy, with I-5, you know. He's saying that it's odd to have a friend in a droid, but it's nice, you know. He's still somewhat still having to kind of get used to it, I think. Um, but also based on how he's been, based on how he acts with I-5 in this chapter, it feels like we're not going to get that. It's very confusing. Let's say confusing. It's very strange to talk about. It's very almost all over the place in a way, you know. Yeah, I think I just kind of want a little bit more. I wanted a little bit more of a transitionary period with that, and and also to kind of have Jax maybe still be a little bit cautious and wary around I-5. I hope that's how it does go, but I don't think it will. But I hope he is still a little bit cautious and wary, but he's again slowly starts warming up, just treating him like a friend at this point. You know, I hope that's the direction it goes in, but I don't think it will. I think they're just gonna. I think again, based on how this chapter went out, he was I-5 was the first one he went to, and now we kind of just was talking to I-5 like, hey, could you do this for me? You know, I feel like that maybe that's not the direction it's going to go. But then again, it could also just be because they're in a situation that they have to get out of. So maybe we will get that. You know, it's a little bit tough to properly gather at the moment. Um, uh, Caird. Um, I really do. They only have two more chapters now. I really do not think Caird is. I do not know how Caird is not appearing in the next book at this point, unless they kill him off. And I know he doesn't die because Wikipedia says he doesn't die, so he isn't dead. So I have no idea how they're gonna write Caird out of this one. I have no idea unless he just gets left behind or goes into his own ship and flies off into the stars, back to the DG, never to be seen again. You know, I hope that's somehow Care's story ends up, and I feel like that's the most likely way it will end. Him going into his ship, possibly getting there before Xizor, and just going home. But then again, I have a feeling Xizor's going to have taken that ship. So yeah, it's a bit. Yeah, there's a lot with this chapter that's to come. There's a lot, but also not a lot in a way. It's strange. Um, yeah, I really do not know how they're gonna write Caird out of this. Um, unless it's like a time jump in the next book. Um, yeah, I don't really have much else to say. Um, hopefully Nick's alright. uh, No, got nothing. So I'm just going to end it here. I'm just going to end it here. I don't have anything else to say. So, thank you all for watching, and goodbye. Actually, is there anything else I want to say? I mean, Den and I5, their interactions are always great, aren't they? Yeah, there's nothing else. So, thank you all for watching, and goodbye.